This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look back at 2019 and maybe a little 2020 vision for the new decade, the old and the new. It's our annual year-end review on inStudio. "2019 had been a pretty good year for Northwest Florida until the morning of December 6th, when our beloved Naval Air Station Pensacola became the setting for a national tragedy. A shooter opened fire, killing 3 and injuring 8. Pensacola's new mayor and Florida's new governor settled into their jobs. Meanwhile, in the nation's capital, it was less settling and more chaos. Our guests on this edition of inStudio are journalists who cover and report the stories that matter. We'll look back on 2019 and do a little prognostication about what we may expect in 2020. Andy Marlette is editorial cartoonist and columnist with the Pensacola News Journal. He has been with the paper and PNJ.com since 2007. It's also worth noting his late uncle is Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist Doug Marlette. Rick Outzen is the owner and publisher of the Inweekly newspaper and the must-read Rick's blog. He is also a published novelist. His book is entitled City of Grudges. The sequel, Blood in the Water, is scheduled to be out in the spring. Dave Dunwoody is a producer and journalist at 88.1 WUWF Radio, our local NPR affiliate. Dunwoody has covered Northwest Florida for over a decade and a half. Over the years, he has held a variety of positions in broadcasting, including being Alabama Bureau Chief for United Press International. Andrew McKay is host of Pensacola's Morning News on News Radio 92.3 and AM 1620. His show has been voted Best Morning Radio Show 3 years in a row by Inweekly's Best on the Coast, Rick's paper. So there you go. Thank you all for joining us. We have a new member this time around, Andy Marlette. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for slumming it with a cartoonist.
Oh, goodness. What a year it was. And as I mentioned in the opening, everything was just, really rolling along nicely for Northwest Florida. Economy doing well. Everybody seemed to be in a pretty good mood. And then we had what happened on the morning of December the 6th. And I mean, just from a journalist standpoint, what were you thinking?
I was thinking that after watching all the other mass shootings around the country, a lot of people had said about those and about Pensacola, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Yeah. And when caught up to us on the 6th.
Yeah. Well, I think it replugged all of us back into the role the military plays in this community and how big the base is to us. I mean, we work downtown. The pilots, the kids that are on that base, I wrote an outtakes. They're our chargers. They're our responsibility. We're that linked to them, and we've had international students at that base forever and ever, and we see them on the streets too. So it really, permeated the consciousness of this community in a different way because we felt responsible for that 23-year-old, that 18, 19-year-old, and then to see our frontline deputies, who are not much older than those kids, respond to it in such a heroic way and do it so decisively, so quickly. And there's so many pieces of this story we haven't been able to tell yet. But what our deputies did, and these are frontline kids, I mean, they're in their 20s, but what they were able to do so quickly is remarkable.
It really is.
There's a special place for the military in Pensacola's heart, and we saw it with Cooch, Jeff Cooch, when he died, the Blue Angel, 3 years ago, and you saw it with this attack, where attacks can be in all kinds of places. They can be in workplaces, they can be in schools, they can be out in public areas. There's something about the base that having the base get attacked felt almost more personal than any of those possibilities. And we all feel the loss of access to the base now, and we all feel like yes, it's a military base with a military mission, but it's our family, right. Our base, our people, our, part of our town, an essential part of our town. That we're not a town with a base, we're a base town, and that's how it was scary. Yeah. We didn't know a lot, we were learning gradually, and, everything that turned out was pretty deeply significant
Still
for
are,
all
you
of
know,
us. Yeah.
Public information, I mean, it's really, I mean, it just hadn't come like it would with any other news event. And that, you know, one of the sort of scope and symbolism of this one's kind of something we hadn't even wrapped our brain around yet, I think, is you really have an international event hitting home and an Escambia County deputy being the guy who ends it.
Right.
And that reach, that gap in between, I just don't know that we really kind of fully understand everything that exists there, but it's tough.
What was it like covering that story? Because there were so many moving parts, and it was really one of those situations you didn't know. Was it an act of terrorism initially? And what was it like, particularly for you guys who were live on the air?
So I was live that morning, and we had just started to get phone calls. People were texting and calling and saying something's going on at the base. I see 15 deputies passing me down Pine Forest or down Blue Angel or down 110. And so at that moment, you know, we start scrambling to find out information. And when people start saying they think it's some kind of an attack, we can't go on the air with that, obviously, until we have better information. Well, I get a call at about 6:53, right before the end of the hour, from Commissioner Jeff Burgash, who works on the base. And he was stopped outside and had gotten word from inside. And I'm like, well, you're an authoritative source. I can put you on the air. You've got accountability. And he started saying, you know, it's an active shooter. The police are on the scene. The base is closed. My guys inside say there's some kind, it's not a drill, it's a real event. And from there, we got some information we quickly got with base public affairs and the sheriff's office, but for a while we just were speculating. And at the beginning we were, I think, all hoping it was a false alarm. Of course, it turned out not to be.
The key to this is going to be, as Sheriff Morgan said just a few hours after the incident, it's going to be a lengthy investigation. Of course, the FBI, very closed mouth, they're not giving out any info. The key for the media is to stay patient and not put the cart before the horse or not go after some wild speculation or anything that. Facts are all that are warranted in this, and we just have to be patient because everything will come out in time.
Right.
But it's going to take a while.
Yeah. I think the media did a pretty good job of doing that, don't you?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, you know, there were a lot of moving parts to it. I think the other thing that jumped out to me was just what a great job Sheriff David Morgan did.
Yeah.
I mean, this is where someone with his demeanor, his command of the situation, and understanding that his job was to make people feel safe, to not exaggerate, not politicize it, but get to the facts and say what he could say. And I think of all the people that spoke at that first press conference, he was the voice that I think the community needed to hear. And I think he's held on to that. But you're right, there's so many pieces that we still don't know. And it's sort of always disconcerting when we have the national media swoop in and they do bits and pieces and they're going to play the game because they're all trying to beat each other.
Right.
I mean, I had one news outlet call me and say, well, so, you know, New York Times got this story. What do you have that I said, that's just not the game we play. This is our community. We're gonna wait, you know. But
They're kind of gone now, aren't
right,
they?
yeah, pretty much so. I mean, it's moved on to another story, and we've had, you know, people calling for this and that, all the politicians, but the heart of the story we still don't know.
And the difference between us and the national media, we live here. We go to the grocery stores, we go to the churches, we go to the ball games. You know, we live among these people, and I feel like that makes us have to be more accountable than the national media.
Well, and that's part of the role you play on the radio, Andrew, and what y'all do on you do too, Dave, is y'all are the first contact for a lot of people on these stories, and the role that you know, radio and television plays is different than the print, and it's, you know, one thing that I thought y'all did very well.
And it was, Rick and I had a really unusual and unique experience regarding this, because literally the day before, we were on a Leadership Pensacola panel on media and how you cover news and how you discern truth from error and whether you go fast or whether you try to get it right. And so we had a lengthy conversation and, you know, about media ethics, and Dave was there, and it's just, we were talking about this, and then the day after I had so many people follow up and say, oh my God, we were just talking about exactly what you guys do on a daily basis.
Yeah. That's why it is so important to have a robust local media.
Right.
And in today's world, when the big corporations want to come in and they want to slice and dice and cut everything, and no offense against a young person who's trying to learn the ropes along the way, but if you don't have some level of experience, some level of authority, and some level of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but some level to be able to kind of moderate and pace yourself through things, that's where the escalation starts happening,
Right.
and bad things become of it, And so, I've said time and time again, it is just so important for our society to have a strong, robust local media.
And and journalists are all competitors in a way, but at the end of the day, this is all of our community.
Right.
And the cartoonist is doing a different thing than the guys on the radio and doing a different thing than Rick's doing. And I think when we're all sort of playing our role and really trying to do what we do and do things, get information and capture these moments for the sake of the folks we live with, the community's better off for it.
Yep.
And that was a great moment. That's how I heard about this news. Is I was dropping the baby off that morning, listening to Andrew on the radio as this unfolded.
Right.
And it's it really kind of hits home when you see.
And I think for not to go back in time, but with the experience with Jeff Coos, we had pretty recent example of when a bad thing happens within the military, how that information is going to come out and what sort of protocols to expect, and the notion that we're going to have to defer a lot to what they say unless we think there's something else going on. So we knew how this was likely to play out from an information perspective, and it was a training of sorts to have that experience from not a couple of years ago.
This is clearly a local experience where it's kind of one of those things where you'll sort of remember where you were that morning, right?
Yeah,
I know I did.
Right.
My family was out of town, and I woke up, turned on the television, saw it on the national news, and of course I, started tuning into you guys when I got in the car on the drive to work, and it was just like unbelievable that this is occurring in my own backyard. How do you think it'll change our community?
The community I don't know so much about, but there'll be changes at NAS Pensacola. I imagine there'll be more security. It'll be a little tougher to get on the base now. The one thing I'm looking at is how is this going to change the international aviation school out there? This is a foreign national, Saudi, but they have pilot students from all over the world, among our allies. And how is this going to change the protocol? And should it change? And should it be different for different groups? Do you treat the Saudis on a different level than you do the Brits? And like that, or even can you do that? Yeah. So I think they've got a lot of studying to do to see, number one, how not to do this again, as happened again, and number two, where does the program go from here?
Yeah, and we still, we were just, I was at the base on Friday doing an interview with the CO, and it's until further notice, the current status. We could get civilian access back to the base like it was before next week, next month, next year, never. We don't know. They're like an ordinary military base now. You can only have access with the Department of Defense ID, and that means behind the perimeter you have the lighthouse and Fort Barrancas, and of course the museum, National Flight Academy.
Huge.
And so we're all concerned, and I know they are too, about that changing. Hopefully not, but that possibility that role could dramatically change in the future. Then again, there's been a long time push to enclave the base into the military control area and the more accessible public area. I think we're likely to see more of a push to make that happen, which is going to take a lot of money because it's the way the base is designed does not make that happen easily.
And then the other question is this being debated in D.C. is, do we arm the people that are on the base? What's the role of the military police? I mean, our deputies were the first responders. Is that something that needs to change? So there's a lot of procedural side of DOD is going to have to look at it and try to figure out. Our worry about access on the base, that's the part that, because it's part, one of the reasons we consider EAS part of Pensacola is that we've always had that ability to go on the base and go take our kids to Fort Barrancas and go to the museum, go to the museum and the lighthouse. Yeah. So there's a lot of deliberation that's going to have to take place, and we don't know.
Well, I just want to say, you're so right about what you said about our Escambia County Sheriff's deputies. I mean, so impressive. I mean, really heroic what they did and how fast they did it, and kudos to them. And of course, the military police, and of course to those young men that led them in the right direction. The young man that eventually passed away. So Impressive.
It was an amazing response all around.
Right.
I mean, this could have been so much worse.
Yes, it could have.
And the way the deputies got on scene, even PPD got inside the perimeter and took care of it with the help of, as you know, the ensign and the other two and others. So
the next time you hear a law enforcement agency talk about, well, we're doing this drill, active shooter drill, and because we have this training, it's going to save lives. We have proof of that now.
Absolutely.
It's like it could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely, sure could have. We're discussing the big stories of 2019 here on inStudio. There's a whole lot more to come right after this break. Hope you'll stay with us. This is WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. Welcome back. This is inStudio on WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're looking back on the big stories of 2019 and looking ahead to what 2020 may bring. Our guest, Rick Outzen from the Inweekly newspaper and Rick's blog, Andy Marlette from the Pensacola News Journal, Andrew McKay from News Radio 92.3 and AM 1620, and also Dave Dunwoody from WUWF 88.1 Radio, the NPR affiliate here in our market. We were talking about the Naval Air Station and the shooting and how well our first responders handled that. And I guess we should too just briefly touch on, it seems like the hospitals in the area and whatnot stepped up to the plate as well. It really was a team effort.
Well, I mean, a lot of the deputies took their own directly to Baptist Hospital as quickly as they got there. I think for the county, it was a test of their EOC capacity. It's a different kind of emergency for EOC. They're used to, storms, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes. And so there was a learning curve on that, because I think some of the hospitals could have been, taken off alert earlier. But in the early stages, we had no idea how many bodies we were dealing with, how many injuries we were dealing with. It was a different test for them that I think hopefully they're debriefing on how to get better at it. But as a whole, the community responded well.
Yeah, I think so too. I mentioned off the top of the program, we have a new mayor, we have a new governor in the state of Florida. Let's talk about the new mayor, Grover Robinson. How's he doing?
Doing a good job, I think.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, it was with all due respect to his predecessor, it's like a breath of fresh air being able to walk into a news conference every Monday morning and seeing what's going on in the city, or getting an announcement and getting an idea for something else that you can go cover. And Grover, it seems like he enjoys the back and forth give and take too. He really enjoys dealing with the media and with the people too. And Ashton, great guy, but I think when he first came, he'd never run for office before, and I think he was a bit of a neophyte, in dealing with people, and he partially grew into the job after 8 years, but Grover has just taken the ball and run with it.
Well, and a little bit of defense too in Ashton. I mean, it was a brand new form of government too, so there was new ground being turned over to try to learn the ropes, perhaps. But you were going to add in on?
Oh yeah, I mean, I didn't know exactly what to expect out of Grover. I mean, he's a commissioner, which is a semi-legislator, semi-administrator, right? He comes over, and I think he's done about as well as you could possibly have expected, better than my expectations, quite frankly. And part of it is because he's staffed effectively around him. Getting Chris Holly to come in and kind of shepherd the new administration and was a brilliant move and very good for him. And he's managed to acquire some other staff along the way and fill some holes that kind of develop. But I'm with Dave. It really is kind of a fresh environment. If anything, the mayor probably talks too much sometimes. And I mean, if you're going to have a fault, be more transparent than you should be. And I think that's been, if anything, that's gotten him in trouble a couple of times, just because he sort of wasn't supposed to disclose something. But that's an error. That's the side of the error I'd rather see a public official on all the time.
Rick?
Well, I think that he had a very early win in being able to complete the funding that was the shortfall that we had on ST engineering. And that took a lot of work on his part to get the Triumph money and to be able to pull that together. And we seem to be on line to eventually have 4 hangars out there at Pensacola International Airport, which would be huge, but that was a big win for him. He's had to deal with some tough issues. The soccer park over, it was over at Hitzman's Park was a big neighborhood fight he had. Of course, the shooting of Tamar Crawford, which is still going to be litigated through. That was a pretty tenuous thing to go through. I think he learned a lot from it, but the one thing I did like was he had an open dialogue with the Dream Defenders and with that part of the community. I think that, of course, most recently we have the cyber attack on the computer. So he's had a kind of a full year of different things that he's had to deal with, and as a whole, I think he's coming out of it with a B, maybe B plus out of the year. Yeah.
Andy, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I tend to judge elected officials by how much cartoon material they get. So far, Grover's on the light side, which is probably a good thing for him. Right. He's only been in a couple, I think, this year in 2019. But yeah, I totally agree. The transparency overall is at a whole another level than it existed in the previous administration. And yes, his press secretary or public information officer may not like that every day, but I got to give Grover credit. I mean, if you call the guy, you text the guy, and even if he doesn't exactly know the answer, he'll call you and try to talk it out with you. That's what we want from our public officials at the end of the day, isn't it?
I think he has a way. The soccer complex is a good example of his approach to governance in conflict is to just go and talk to people and listen and talk and just hang out and just kind of work it through until you can see some kind of an endpoint. And that works effectively for him as far as I've seen.
I've seen a lot of Grover as a county commissioner. He was the go-to guy for the oil spill. Everything, how it affected Escambia County. He was on 2 or 3 boards which were going to decide how to distribute the money from BP and like that. And I think that, to me, that's a lot of invaluable experience as mayor. He knows how to handle crises, and he knows how to, get people on board and get things done. I believe in large part because of how he handled the BP oil spill.
I think if I had a criticism, and we've been discussing a lot at our office, is that he's had a tendency. Some significant hires that he's had have been done without doing, requesting job applications. I mean, he brought in Chris Holly, and the thought that we had when Chris Holly came in was that would give him a year to do a national search. Well, in the end, he just moves up Keith Wilkins, his assistant administrator. CFO, everyone believes that Dick Barker was on his way out. He's been around forever. He's already gone through retirement 300 or 400 times, and
I think it's only 175.
Right, and so he brings in the interim county administrator, Amy Lavoie, to be his deputy, without interviewing anybody else for the job. Now she's going to be promoted to CFO, and Dick Barker's not leaving. He's now going to be the assistant administrator. Again, a position done without any real open search for the job. City attorney Susan Wolf. All these people may be really fine people and are fine people, but these positions are being sought without us going outside of the gene pool and seeing what else is available. When he has gone out and picked people from the outside, they seem to be highly qualified people. People want to work in Pensacola. I'm a little concerned that we're seeing the same old faces. I mean, it's back to the future. We're back to the 1990s.
Well, that was a major part of Grover's campaign, is that we're gonna have a process to find the best talent, bring them in from wherever they're from, and that's who we're going to build this team with. And I don't know that they've totally done that yet.
Not that these people aren't good people, but we haven't tested the water to see who we could have gotten as a city administrator, who else could have been a city attorney or the CFO, or do we need to keep Dick Barker? Do we need to keep Rusty Wells? Do we need to keep all these people? Or there's good people out there that we could give an opportunity and get maybe a little bit more innovative, but that's an old newspaper publisher talk.
I will say the one that I noticed the most vivid example was when he brings in Susan to do legal. I mean, she's just been, again, there may be other people out there, but she's been fantastic from what I've noticed. Her reform within the department, her public presentation of issues when you watch city council meetings, there's substance, depth, it's interesting and helpful, which I've found immeasurably valuable.
Right, the legal team has seemed like a whole nother level
Right.
also.
And I'm very impressed with the Public Information Office. Casey has come in and done just an excellent job in keeping everybody in the loop, keeping everyone, keeping the transparency up there. Like you said, she may not like all of it, but she does a great job in making sure that we have what we need going into covering something with city government.
Well, when the bar was so low, it's not better. It's supposed to be better than that.
I think I called it the Great Wall of Vernon once.
What about our governor, new governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis? Has he surprised you?
It's such a weird mix from my perspective, because on the one hand, so much, I think, bipartisan stuff and so much good fulfilling promises, and on the other hand, when it came to something that was very significant here in Escambia County, the replacement for a ECUA board member who passed away, not only couldn't we get anything done, it took 10 months finally. There were no answers to be had, there was no explanation, there was nothing. It was, hey, this is the part of the state that elected you, at least tell us what's going on, and it was nothing. Well, it finally came through, and so on the one hand, a lot of really good things, and then there's these elements that look concerning, like that one.
I'm impressed with the way he handled the aftermath of Hurricane Michael.
Absolutely.
He was there almost every day as much as he could be. He got a lot of money for the people who were victimized by the storm. He showed, I told somebody once, he showed me a lot of Jeb Bush, in the 04 and 05 when all those hurricanes hit Florida.
I think he's been a surprise. We got used to Rick Scott, who was very much about Rick Scott. Rick Scott did not work with the state lawmakers very well. He had a tremendous amount of scandals, and he sort of ran his own to his own tune, raised his own money, separated himself from the Florida Republican Party, and pretty much bought the office. DeSantis has come in and been more moderate on some points. He's still very much a Trump person and very much a conservative, but he's listened and worked with people. I think what happened on the ECA job, from what I understand, is that he so micromanages all those appointments. He just had to drill down till he got to ECUA. And but he's done the same thing with a lot of appointments across the state. So for the most part, in talking to the lawmakers, they feel like they've got a governor they can work with than what they had with Rick Scott. And this session will be interesting to see how it plays out. It's an early session, starts next month, and we'll see how it plays out. If he can get the bonuses, the raise and pay for the teachers, which that will be a significant win for him.
Andy?
I miss Rick Scott personally.
As a cartoonist.
As a cartoonist. I mean, not only do we have the same haircut, but which allowed me to make bald jokes without being baldest. And Scott was great for cartoonists as governor. Probably not good for Florida, but great for cartoonists. So far, DeSantis has seemed pretty solid. I try to wait to reserve judgment as long as possible. I mean, he's billed himself as an environmentalist with Everglades water issues in South Florida. But locally, with some of the issues that we've dealt with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection and their permitting problems with International Paper and their pollution discharges, we really haven't been able to get direct feedback from the governor's office. And I think there's an opportunity for him to jump in this part of the state too, and take the reins on something like this and really kind of change the culture of the DEP in Northwest Florida that has a long history of not doing the mission that it's intended to do in protecting the environment. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that he can jump in and do that.
I think what we see also with Governor DeSantis is background in the military, background as legal, background as a U.S. representative. That's all really helpful because it helps him work better with the legislature. I felt like he basically got what he wanted done through the legislature last year. I'm pretty confident it's going to wind up being the same thing. The teacher raises are going to be a huge milestone for him for pulling in more votes for re-election, but doing what's right by the student. I mean, I see that happening.
Could he be the next big star of the Republican Party?
I don't think it's the next. I mean, based on performance, and I'm with Andy, you know, be cautious, but based on the first year, I mean, it's kind of now.
Yeah. I just mean for more national office somewhere down the road. Somebody going to be talking about him, you know, a handful of years from now?
I think he thinks so.
Yeah. And I mean, you know,
He should. I mean,
yeah,
he's earned it.
Third most populated state in the nation. We're rapidly growing. People are flying out of New York and Connecticut and various places and coming to Florida.
But keep in mind, there was a point in time when Charlie Crist was also the next big
Right,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So these things come and go fast. It's hard to keep up. I can barely draw fast enough.
Speaking of drawing, coming up a little bit later in this broadcast, we're going to pull out some of Andy's cartoons and get him to talk a little bit about them, and we'll get the rest of the panel to kind of give us a little bit of their insight and thoughts on what the message is there. You are watching inStudio on WSRE television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We'll come back in just a couple of moments. Hope you'll stay with us.
A few years ago, WSRE had an idea to create a special place where children and the adults in their lives could come together to play, learn, and have fun. The Imagination Station, located at the Wahoo Stadium, was created in 2013, and since we opened the doors, over 85,000 children and families have visited this amazing place. 85,000 children and families! Can you imagine? We also invite community groups to utilize the wealth of resources, books, toys, and activities there. The Imagination Station is made possible by grants and contributions from viewers just like you, and we thank you. You are bringing smiles to the faces of these children, giving them opportunities to explore activities, learn, and have fun. WSRE loves our PBS kids, and we take their education very seriously. It's our mission. Thank you for being an important part of early learning at the WSRE Imagination Station.
Welcome back. This is inStudio on WSRE television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. We're discussing the defining stories of 2019. Our guests are Andy Marlette, editorial cartoonist at the Pensacola News Journal, Dave Dunwoody, producer and journalist with 88.1 WUWF Radio, Rick Outzen, owner and publisher of the Inweekly and Rick's blog, and also Andrew McKay from News Radio 92.3 and AM 1620. Andy, talking about cartoons, you brought some along. We're going to show them. We'll have you talk a little bit about them. Let's pull up our first cartoon here, and we'll get Andy to kind of tell us what you were thinking.
I apologize in advance.
There you go. Take a look at the big monitor out there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, we were talking about international paper in the DEP earlier.
Yeah. Well, a little depiction of the local Northwest Florida DEP, sort of turning a blind eye to the almost 24 million gallons a day of pollution that is discharged from international paper.
What kind of response have you gotten? I know because you've written some columns about that as well.
Well, we tried to make this a recurring theme, and I think there's tremendous interest from the community. I mean, everybody knows the paper mill as this sort of a landmark, and not the best of landmarks for our community, and but it's not being regulated the way it's been promised to the citizens, and that the department who is charged with that and who taxpayers pay for has failed their most primary mission. So we've really tried to focus on that because it's an opportunity for Escambia County to do better than it has historically.
Yeah, we did a poll right after the News Journal did their series on IP, and just to see where the community was on the environment, and we found that a vast majority of the community don't believe that we're more polluted today than we were 20 years ago. That over 60% of them believe that our local officials do more for the corporations than interested in what's in best interest of the public, and most of them want to see more regulation, more transparency on what's happening in these discharges and how they're following the environmental laws. So I think some of our politicians are still catching up to this, but I think the public is very much concerned. I think when we had the explosion at the IP plant in 2017, that kind of tipped because we had a horrible time during that period getting IP to tell us what's in that black goo, what was emitted, what happened at the plant, so it's created an environment where people are definitely worried about what's happening here.
You gentlemen want to comment on that? Or?
My only thought is, not having lived here as long as I think all of you, when I came to Escambia County, the thing that surprised me over time that I learned about was all the Superfund sites.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And, which I guess comes with the territory being some of the industries that are here, but it's this legacy of bad management of these resources, and that again and again, it's not just deep in the past. I mean, look at Wedgwood,
Right.
IP aside, this is an ongoing systemic kind of behavioral problem that we seem to have here. And I'd never lived anywhere where you drive past this Superfund site and this Superfund site and this, and it's all gated off and barbed wire and federal property. And so it's a little bit sobering to think about whether those things have been fixed in the present, and obviously how they were not fixed in the past.
Let's take a look at the next slide here from Andy Marlette. The next cartoon we'll pull up and get him to talk a little bit about that. Speaking of guns.
Yes. 2019 is the year we got guns in classrooms, but in the state legislative chambers, you're still not allowed to carry guns. So I don't know how that adds up, but welcome to Florida.
Do you think what happened at Naval Air Station Pensacola will change any minds on gun laws in Northwest Florida?
I don't know.
It's pretty well entrenched. I mean, there are people who believe that guns save lives, and there are people who believe that guns kill people, and getting those two groups to talk to each other effectively is very difficult. And every school shooting that happens, or every workplace shooting, and even an event like at NAS Pensacola, the response from one part of the community is arm the sailors, and the response from another part of the community is how on earth do we have so many guns, or how do they have access to these guns? And I'm not sure, because I have not seen progress much on any of that with any of the events, even Parkland. Mm-hmm. The bill passed, but people are still angry at, for example, Senator Broxson for being a part of the group that made it so you couldn't buy a gun at 18, 19, and 20, mm-hmm. feeling like that was a betrayal of the Second Amendment. So I don't see progress between those two groups yet.
This is an argument, excuse me, this is an argument that's going to go on in perpetuity because of the Second Amendment, of people's interpretations of the Second Amendment. It's amazing how such a few words can be interpreted so many ways. And it's not going to be anything that's going to be solved, I don't think, for generations, because we have a gun culture. We have, you hand down your guns from father to son to grandson, and you teach them, you take them out, teach them, how to shoot, how to handle them. And it's just part of the culture, and it's not going to be, anything that's going to, go away in 10, 20, or even 50 years.
Well, what I'm interested to see is what's going to happen to the NRA. I mean, they've had a very, very bad year. I mean, they have, their leadership is in disarray. They've used funds that were given as dues for their own benefit. There's a Russian element involved. We had the lobbyists for the state of Florida getting loans, favorable loans at rates. So money has not been used the way that the NRA members thought it was going to be used. Does that impact their influence over the legislature this year, or with this being an election year, will we see them, try to again dictate who's going to get elected in the 2020 year? If Doug Broxson gets a credible candidate, that'll be interesting to see, because you're right, they were upset with him. He was the swing vote for the state Senate. Will that be enough for them to try to defeat him, or do they even try to defeat him? So the NRA is the player here, and how active they'll be this year and how credible they'll be after this horrible year that they've had will be interesting to watch.
This could be their crossroads, how they rebound from all of the trouble they've had in the past year or two, and how many politicians that they can persuade to vote their way in their respective bodies.
Right. Interesting. Let's move on to our next slide that we have that Andy has.
It's like show and tell.
It is. But Andy, tell us about this one.
Well, I don't know the words in it. This is our president and the shadow of Mr. Nixon.
Yeah. So, you know, as we tape this program, that it is mid-December here, so this story is quickly developing, and so by the time this broadcast airs, who knows what the situation will be. We can certainly speculate the likelihood of what the situation will be. What do you guys make of what's going on in Washington? What do you make of it? The whole impeachment thing.
Good for cartoonists, bad for America.
That's a pretty tight prism you work in.
So the one thing that I've really wondered, and I'm not old enough to have really lived through the Nixon era, but looking back, my perception is that all of America recognized that this was bad behavior, unacceptable. He had to go. That is clearly not the case today.
Yeah.
Now, is that because America has changed? Is that because the behavior was worse with Nixon? Is that because the case hasn't been made? There's a lot of questions still to be answered, but when I look at that cartoon and you say, in the shadow of Nixon, but the reception by the American people to this impeachment process has been as divisive as anything that's ever associated with Trump. There are people who think he should have been gone already, and then there are people who think, what are you trying to do? You're trying to remove a president for this? Mm-hmm. So I don't know what it was like with Nixon, but my sense was it was much more of an agreement by the whole country.
Well, I think one thing we're having in this process is the White House is not, they've kept documents from Congress. They've not allowed people to testify. They have created a kangaroo court type situation because it's to their benefit. We're being denied knowledge. We're being denied evidence. And for me as a journalist, when one side doesn't want to let people speak and doesn't want to show documents, then all the radar goes off that if you're innocent, you shouldn't have a problem doing that. And I think that part sticks out. But the other side being said, 78%, 80% of the Republicans, no matter what they are going to back Trump, 80% of the public will. Mm-hmm. Or the Republicans will. Just about an equal number on the Democratic side. And then in the middle, it's about the no party affiliates are about 50-50. So it's a pretty divisive time.
And then historically, that's who elects presidents, is the people in the middle, the no party affiliates, the undecided, who finally make up their mind. The Republicans are going to back their nominee, the Democrats are going to back theirs. So their main mission, both parties' main mission, is to go after the people in the middle and try to persuade them to pull the lever on Election Day. And for right now, that is just up in the air. It's so divisive now that sometimes you wonder if there's even a middle or an undecided.
Well, in the Nixon era, we had Republicans did step forward and agree that these were high crimes and misdemeanor. Barry Goldwater, very famous, going to see Nixon and telling him he isn't going to have the votes in the Senate to win, and he wasn't going to have his. And that was the day before he resigned. So, we have a different environment then, and it's sort of sad to see it that there doesn't seem to be a guiding principle. It seems to be a party affiliation.
Interesting. We'll move on to our last cartoon here that Andy did. And
please.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is reward or punishment.
This is it here. So, Andy, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, but obviously we talked about this at the top of the show.
Yeah, it's just our attempt to pay some sort of tribute in the midst of tragedy to the boys from Pensacola.
Yeah.
So.
I'll say one thing. It's a little. Some of the cartoons that you draw, there's a range of kinds of cartoons, but I think that my personal favorites. I love the ones you do where you're honoring people when they passed.
Yeah.
I think some of those have been some of the most touching.
Yeah, the obituary cartoons are always sort of powerful. They remind people that you're not a partisan evil nightmare, that they fantasize with. There's a human side to cartoon, and that's sort of the power of the medium, is that you can throw the fastball when you need to, or the uppercut, but also sometimes there's a soft side to political cartoons.
Yeah, I'm curious how you got started drawing those.
Man, I tell you, I remember being very young, and during the Challenger explosion, my uncle Doug Marlette, I think at the time, was drawing for the Charlotte Observer, I believe, and he on deadline that afternoon did an obituary cartoon in this moment of great tragedy. And it became a really iconic American editorial cartoon of a bald eagle looking to space with a single tear coming out of his, and the Observer was flooded with requests for reprints, and they mailed out copies to all their readers, and it just became a real power. And I remember that being one of the first sort of times I got how a cartoon worked. I got that. I got how it got an emotion across, and it was kind of powerful in that way to me. So,
How did you get started with the pearly gates motif?
Oh, well, that's probably Bugs Bunny, or I'm sure it was Looney Tunes. Something.
Is it hard for you? Is it a challenge every day, or does it just flow? Does it just come easy?
These days, I can't draw fast enough. The material is coming, is everywhere. Actually, part of the challenge is something my uncle used to say, is what happens when real life is becoming a cartoon? And when reality becomes so cartoonish, how do you exaggerate it anymore? And I think that's something you see Saturday Night Live struggle with as well. How do you make a joke about something that's actually a joke?
That's funny. Rick, every year you talk about some of the power players and winners and losers and things like that. Let's just talk about some of the personalities around Northwest Florida.
Are there any?
There's one or two. Talk about some of the personalities that are really making a difference in our community right now.
Well, I think that a person that I have seen grow tremendously as a leader has been Commissioner Lumen May. I mean, he has had to chair the county commission through two of the most difficult years we had. This past year, we had county government sort of implode over EMS and musical chairs on who's going to be the administrator, and he had to guide us through that. The last time he was chairman, we had a flood, we had a gel explosion, Wedgwood hit. It was another time of a lot of turmoil going on. George Tuart passed away that year too. So he's always been he's never had a full year with a sitting county administrator, so he's put him in a different role. And then what you look at what he does with SYSA and the Soul Bowl and what that Brownsville Community Center is starting to become under his leadership, I think that, and he is blunt and funny and irreverent, sometimes to his own detriment. People misunderstand him, but he's definitely one of the colorful people that we've got.
Yeah.
Funniest. I would easily. Funniest. Yeah.
I might hit on a couple of names and get you guys just to kind of comment here. Matt Gaetz.
Matt.
Andy loves Matt. Yeah. Matt is Andy's favorite politician.
Again, good for cartoons. No, Matt's great. Extreme. I mean, a phenomenal political talent. And that can come across in the most cynical way you want it to mean. But for better or worse, he is excellent at what he does. And he's one of those storylines. I guess we'll all wait and see how it plays out for him. But is there a bigger name right now in Northwest Florida?
We had a press gaggle back in August. Matt Gaetz was on Andy's radio show, and after that, the rest of the media, we were waiting out at the 1620 building. He comes out, and I was bound and determined not to encourage him to say the word Trump. So my questions were about what's going on in the First District, Veterans Affairs, military money in the budget, medicinal marijuana, some of the things he's lined up for. And I will give him great credit. he answered every one of my questions fully, and he did not stray off topic. So I was rather impressed with that.
He doesn't answer my questions.
So I know Matt extremely well. You know, we have him on the show all the time, and knew him from back when he was a state representative, and his dad was still, you know, in the Senate and all that. I'm tremendously impressed with his intellectual gifts. You know, he's an extremely sharp guy, and like Dave says, he is as a communicator, he's almost the opposite of Trump. Even though they're tight allies, the way he communicates is straight to the point, legal mind, evidence, reason, logic. You might disagree with it, but that's how he communicates. I've seen him digest material more effectively and then able to explain it back almost to people who are asking him about it, and he knows it better than they do, even just in the moment. You know, like Andy said, talented politically, but also just as a thinker and a communicator. I've always found him impressive. Some people that I have on my show, they always like to know in advance, you know, what we're doing. And some people I've at times talked to Matt, and he's like, just hit me with it. We're good. And that's, you know, there's a kind of knowledge and confidence that he exudes, and rightly so. Again, even if you disagree with him.
And I would like to know what's going through his head when he does stuff like charge into a closed hearing room or gets in judiciary and starts trying to shout down the chairman. You know, I kind of wonder, you know, what's going through his mind. What is his strategy behind that? Because as Andrew said, he does have, you know, he appears to have a sharp mind. He appears to be in control of what he's doing, even when he appears out of control. So, you know, I've always wondered, how does he kind of, you know, offset the two and know when to turn it on, know when to turn it off?
You know, one of the things about Matt is when he says things, they sound very pretty. They sound good. They're not always honest. And you know, one of the great examples of that was during the fee simple debate. You know, he was going to town halls and doing public town, large and small, and he was in the room over and over telling people the press is the enemy of the people. The news journal is lying to you. These reporters are lying. They're lying. Now, I'm fine. You disagree all day long. That's part of the business. But when you say reporters are lying to you, that's a different thing. So out in the parking lot, our reporter, Melissa Nelson Gabriel at the time, confronted and said, Matt, if there's something wrong with my reporting, please tell me what it is. Please tell me what I got wrong. And there in front of our reporter and photographer, he's, you know what, I didn't mean that. I was just saying that. You got it right. You did fine. And that's very unfortunate to me, because for all that talent that Matt has, he could choose to also be honest and 100% ethical and play it by the book, but he doesn't always do that.
And that can wreck his credibility down the road. And in politics, journalism, politics, if you don't have your credibility, you don't really have a whole lot.
Yeah, and the long timeline, you know, it's a long stretch, and at the end of the day, you know, that's one of the things you got to keep sacred, I think. But
Commentary, Rick?
We fight about him every week. Yeah, how to keep you? How many times can we put him on the loser side? You know, and I mean, Matt is brilliant. I like Matt to the astonishment of my family, but you know, he plays. He's playing a different game, you know, and he's speaking to a different audience. I know that in Northwest Florida, he's probably got, you know, 2 out of 3 votes are going to be his vote. I think that when he really focuses on servicing us and not entertaining the president, I think he's very, very effective. But all these publicity stunts, they're all thought out. I guess I'm like Andy, you know, what happens when and if Trump goes away? What kind of congressman are we going to have then? Yeah, and so that's the part that we worry about.
Got about 3 minutes here. Just hit a couple other names. You guys just give me Mike Hill.
who?
He's going to have obviously a challenge.
Where's our star? All I want to talk about is where is the Donald Trump star?
We
never got that. We were promised a Trump star. I'm not talking about it until he delivers the star.
What kind of chance do you think Michelle Salzman would have in running against him?
It's tough. I mean, you know, he's been running for a long time, high name recognition. He's the most ineffective legislature in the Florida House. He probably will not get a bill. Even a bill with Chappie Name's name on it for the bridge will probably not pass this legislative session. But he will be tough to beat.
if you go 0 for 9 with the Blue Wahoos, you may end up, back in A ball. He went 0 and 9 in the legislature last year, and he gets to keep his job, at least for a while.
Real quick, Chip Simmons running for sheriff.
Well, he was brought on by Sheriff Morgan as the heir apparent, and I believe unless David Alexander or somebody else shows the voters something really, really special, I think he'll be the next sheriff.
All right. Let me kind of wrap things up here in about 3 minutes left. What do you think as we look forward to 2020? What are you most excited about? What do you think the big story will be 2020? Andy, I'll begin with you.
I mean, it's showtime, baby. It's the big one, right? It's all the election all year, which is, oh man, I'm tempted to move to the woods and commune with the bears and sane organisms out there, but that's it. The election.
Real quick, does Trump get reelected?
Sure. Yeah. No idea.
Rick?
Trump get elected? Right now, I'd say it's still an even game.
Yeah.
You would think with all the impeachment and everything, we just don't know.
Yeah.
I think the big story, two big stories for next year. Can the city continue to implement the skate plan? Will Grover be able to keep the council together and be able to start prioritizing what they're going to do? That's going to be a huge thing. And the other thing is, will the Wizard of Oz, the county administrator, Janice Gilley, come behind the curtain and actually start leading the county? Will she start to come out and actually do something? She's promised us she'd bite a head off a frog. She'll get bloody in the arena. You got to show up for work, and you got to get out from behind the curtain. So what kind of county government, how that shapes up next year will be interesting to see.
Dave?
I think eventually, at some point in 2020, the investigation into the NAS shooting will end, and we will find out what happened. And from there, we're going to see some, as we mentioned earlier, we're going to see some major changes, I think, both at NAS and also maybe with local and state law enforcement who had to respond.
About 1 minute, Andrew.
Yeah, I would call it for Trump at this point, unless something dramatic changes, and especially with the second investigation about the behavior of the FBI, I think that's going to favor him a lot. And unless the economy completely implodes or the China deal doesn't pay off or things that all seem to be going in the right direction, there's no reason to think that anybody from the Democrat side can beat him at the national level.
Yeah.
Locally, Michelle and Mike, that's going to be an interesting one to watch because the people who love Mike. But Michelle has a lot of name recognition, and people really like what she's done with the kids in the past and where she is now. So
it'll be very interesting to see. Gentlemen, thank you so very much. Andy, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
It was always a lot of fun. We try to do this every year, and sometimes we stick one in the middle of the year, and we may do that in 2020 because no doubt 2020 will be interesting with it being a big-time presidential election year. We have been looking back on some of the big stories of 2019 and also kind of taking a look ahead at what is sure to be an exciting 2020 with it being a presidential election year, as I just said. Our guests have been Dave Dunwoody, the producer and journalist at 88.1 WUWF Radio, Andrew McKay from News Radio 92.3 FM and 1620 AM, Rick Outzen, owner and publisher of the Inweekly newspaper and Rick's blog, and also Andy Marlette, editorial, cartoonist, and columnist with the Pensacola News Journal. This program will be available soon online at WSRE.org as well as on YouTube. Please feel free to share. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the broadcast. Also, thank you so very much for supporting WSRE Television, PBS for the Gulf Coast. I wish you all the very best in 2020.
Go Argos.
Go Argos, that's right.